All right, recording in three, two, and one.
So the last movie or the last episode we talked about blaxploitation films. We talked about five of them that you've probably heard of. One of these you've heard of. The other four you probably haven't, but you should check them out.
All right, welcome to episode 198 of Nerdery and Murdering.
Big 198. I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Jeffrey with your Murdering. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows, the ups, the down, the good and the bad, and the nerd and the murd. Um, my friend Chuck gets two plugs 2 weeks in a row here.
Wake up,
For,
Chuck!
and for reasons. He told me, he said, I think I'm getting your episodes late because you had just talked about in your last episode that Miranda was coming to town and she didn't come to town she came to town back in December. I said, yeah, we're way ahead in our
You're like 10
recordings. So
weeks.
we're you have to you have to suspend that. And that leads me into my next conversation because for a lot of you this is very old news, but it's fresh for us. Two big Hollywood deaths.
Yes.
Gene Hackman, his
Mm-hmm.
wife, and their dog.
Yeah.
It's mysterious circumstances around that. I'm waiting for news on that. I did see an article that his cardiologist said that if he was having a heart issue, his cardiac monitor would have alerted.
Yeah.
So, but they've ruled out carbon monoxide. It's just some
Oh, they
weird.
did rule out carbon monoxide,
They have ruled out carbon monoxide. Yep,
and I'm assuming gas leaks. Like check that too.
haven't heard on that. So
Well, I
I'm
mean,
I'm assuming.
if they went in and found him, they would have noticed there was a gas leak because people would have been passing out.
Yeah, probably. So, be interesting to find out what the cause of that was. Um, and then Michelle Trachtenberg
Mm-hmm.
died from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I've never watched Buffy, but I knew her from European Road Trip
Oh
or
yeah.
Euro
Euro
Trip,
trip. Yeah, I
which I
loved her
thought
in
was
Euro
funny.
trip.
I did too. So two sad passings. It's
Yeah,
just happened almost
Michelle
back to
Trachtenberg was young too.
39, I think, 37 or 39, I think I saw. Because in Buffy, she played Buffy's little sister.
Yeah, she was like a teenager. She was also Harriet the Spy.
Oh, was she?
Hmm.
Gotcha. So yeah, some couple of Hollywood deaths there. And again, we're in the past for a lot of y'all, but I'm very excited because my sister and her husband and my bonus mom are all coming down for a visit. They haven't been down to this house yet.
Nice.
So they're coming for a visit, because some people actually decide to come and visit me down here.
Hey, don't move
So
1,200 miles away.
I am not 1,200 miles away. I am 504. That's a day trip.
An all-day trip.
The day trip. Or get on Southwest Airlines. You can get down here for about $100. The
Just
airport's like 12.
2 hours for me to get to Dallas.
The airport's like 2 hours, 12 minutes away.
Not for me. Love Field is 2 hours.
Well, okay, so 2 hours, an hour-long flight versus the nine and a half to drive here. It's going to be difference between 3 hours and nine and a half drive here.
God, oh, what a beatdown.
I've come up and visited you.
You came up to visit the three geeky ads. I just had to, or the two geeks in a microphone. I just happened to be there.
Yeah, does not change my statement in the least little bit.
That's true.
So there, take that. All right. You got anything? Are you ready to step over to the nerdy side of the house?
No, no, it's I'm kind of I'm kind of anxious to get to these blaxploitation films.
All right, go for it.
As we said before, an exploitation film is a film that tries to succeed financially by exploiting current trends, niche genres, or lurid content. And again, all movies are exploitation films at this point. But back in the 70s, that wasn't the case. Um, so some of these films contain uh, ideas of solidarity and social consciousness alongside the genre uh, typical images of sex and violence. But again, it was the early 70s. But knowing that the film could bring about social and cultural change, the Black Power movement seized the genres to highlight Black socioeconomic struggles in the 70s. Many such films contained Black heroes who were able to overcome an institutionalized oppression of African American culture and history. Later films such as Superfly softened the rhetoric of Black Power, encouraging resistance within the capitalist system. rather than radical transformation of society. Um, and we're gonna talk about a few of those kind of films today. Today we're gonna start with Black Caesar. Um, in the UK, it was the cinemas of Godfather of Harlem, is what it was titled. In a 1973 American blaxploitation crime drama film written and directed by Larry Cohen and starring Fred Williamson, Gloria Hendry, and Julius Harris. It features a musical score by James Brown with heavy input from his band leader Fred Wellesley. His first experience with writing music for a film. The sequel, titled Hell Up in Harlem, was released in late 1973. Over here, let's see how much Black Caesar we've got. I think we've just got a bunch of scenes from Black Caesar. It is You are able to get out and see it. Fred Williamson is great um, in Black Caesar. Um, did find out in an interview with Fred Williamson that James Brown agreed to do the soundtrack for $5. $5. And it's incredible. The film script was originally commissioned by Sammy Davis Jr. And according to Larry Cohen, Davis wanted to do a picture in which he was the star instead of being a flunky to Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. So Cohen suggested that they do a gangster movie like Little Caesar, since he was a little guy, and so was Jimmy Cagney, and so was Edward G. Robinson. And Cohen thought he could play a little hoodlum working his way up in the Harlem underworld. Um, but instead, the film went to Fred Williamson. Tommy Gibbs is an African American who grew up in Harlem, New York City as a kid. He was brutally assaulted by a cop named McKinney, and as an adult, he joins the New York Mafia and becomes the head of a black crime syndicate in Harlem. He wages a gang war with the Italian mobsters of New York City and begins to establish a criminal empire, keeping a ledger book of all his dealings as leverage over his business associates, including McKinney. He meets and falls in love with a singer named Helen and marries her. She's unhappy. And there's violence between them. Eventually, his enemies conspire with her, leading to an attempt on his life that leaves him shot and wounded. Killing his would-be assassin, he returns to his office to retrieve the ledger book. McKinney meets him there and attempts to humiliate him before killing him. Tommy overpowers McKinney and beats him to death. Retrieving the ledger, and badly wounded Tommy returns to the house where he grew up, but a street gang attacks, robs, and presumably kills him. In Hell Up in Harlem, it takes place at the end of that attack, if you've ever seen it. I'm not a big fan of Hell Up in Harlem. It doesn't have the same punch as Black Caesar, but it's kind of the idea of Black Caesar. It traces the rise of this basically righteous person um, who ends up having to do crime when he's young
Hmm.
to get by, and eventually he becomes the thing that he hates the most by the end of the film. And in Hell Up in Harlem, kind of he goes from being that evil gangster back to a heroic figure. So he's not necessarily heroic, but it does counter the rise and fall of a man. Very much in the same vein as um, the Al Pacino film Scarface. Yeah, very much in that vein. Tony Montoya is not a bad guy, but he becomes a bad guy. Same with uh, Black Caesar. Soundtrack is incredible by James Brown. Some of the really great early '70s stuff. This is the point where I believe, and I could be mistaken, but I'm relatively certain, Bootsy's on the bass. This is before he joined Parliament, when he was still with James Brown. I think this is like one of the last things he did with James Brown before he left. Him and Maceo um, on the horns, just incredible. Um, Great stuff. In the Blaxploitation music, or Blaxploitation cinema music episode, there is a song off Black Caesar that to me, in my mind, is just incredible. Probably some of the best stuff he's done. Have you ever seen Black Caesar?
Hmm.
Yeah, this is one that not a lot of people have seen. This episode, four of these films, very few people have seen, unless they were into the genre. Um, or around in the early 70s because they were fairly big, but um, this is one of those ones that kind of went under the radar, which amazes me because the soundtrack was so good and it sold well. Um, the next film is one you've heard of. It's Shaft. It's a 1971 American blaxploitation crime action thriller film directed by Gordon Parks, written by Ernest Tidyman and John D.F. Black. It's an adaptation of Tidyman's novel of the same name and is now the first entry in the Shaft film series. The plot revolves around a private detective named John Shaft who is hired by a Harlem mobster to rescue his daughter from the Italian mobsters who kidnapped her. The film stars Richard Roundtree as Shaft alongside Moses Gunn, Charles Cioffi, Christopher St. John, and Lawrence Pressman. The film explores themes including masculinity and sexuality with a specific emphasis on Black power. It was filmed in Harlem, Greenwich Village, and Times Square within the Manhattan borough of New York City. The Shaft soundtrack album, recorded by Isaac Hayes, was also a success, winning a Grammy Award for Best Original Score written for a motion picture and a second Grammy shared by Johnny Allen for Best Instrumental Arrangement. The theme from Shaft won the Academy Award for Best Original Song, making Hayes the first black man to win the award for that category. The song has appeared on multiple top 100 lists, and including AFI's 100 Years, 100 Songs. It is a prime example of the blaxploitation genre. It was selected in 2000 for preservation of the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Shaft initially had two sequels called Shaft's Big Score and Shaft in Africa, though neither enjoyed the critical success of the original. Um, Shaft was adapted from Ernest Tidyman's novel by Tidyman and screenwriter John D.F. Black. Joel Freeman and executive producers Starling Silliphant and Roger Lewis produced the film. The screen detective genre in the late 60s had been dominated by the big movies' big stars. Paul Newman and Harper, um, uh, Frank Sinatra as Tony Rome, uh, and the Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry films. Although Black in the source novel, Tidyman's original draft screenplay had Shaft as white. However, Gordon Parks cast African American actor Richard Roundtree as the eponymous hero. The entire dynamic of the film, its later success, and the future of blaxploitation films were all greatly impacted by Parks' decision. Having said all that, as I have said in a previous episode, I think Shaft is more of a film de noir than a
Hmm.
blaxploitation film. Although it has a lot of blaxploitation elements in it. The next two, Shaft in Africa and Shaft's Big Score, definitely blaxploitation films, but this is really kind of film noir, where Shaft ends up in the exact same place he was at the beginning of the film. Uh, but it was something they hadn't done before. They hadn't cast an African American actor as the gumshoe detective, the cowboy character, the person who has his own moral code of ethics.
Right.
The pirate, the cowboy, the gumshoe detective. Which is the anti-hero. That is purely an American idea, but it shows up a lot in our cinema, particularly after like 1930. Um, it keeps coming up over and over again. You've seen Shaft, right?
Mm. A very long time ago.
Yeah.
And again, there are pieces of it that I like, but overall, a lot of it it's just this is just not my style.
Um, yeah, Shaft is one of those ones that everybody's heard of, and everybody thinks of as blaxploitation films. But I would, if you see Shaft and you like what it what it's about, what you see, I would recommend going into some of these films we've named here today because it's going to surprise you how some of these little film companies were able to do these great films. And again, Shaft's a good place to start. Um, but the next film, um, Cotton Comes to Harlem, is a 1970 American neo-noir action comedy film co-written and directed by Ozzie Davis and starring Godfrey Cambridge, Raymond St. Jacks, and Red Fox. The film, later cited as an early example of the blaxploitation genre, is based on Chester Himes' novel of the same name. No, this came out in 1970, so this actually came out a year before Shaft.
Hmm.
The opening theme, Ain't Now, but It's Gonna Be Me, was written by Ozzie Davis and performed by Melba Moore. The film was one of the many black films that appeared in the 1970s and became overnight hits. It was followed 2 years later by the sequel, Come Back Charleston Blue, which is also a great film. But basically, Deke Reverend O'Malley, a con man, is selling shares at a Harlem rally for the purchase of a Back to Africa movement ship to be called the Black Beauty. During the rally, several masked gunmen jump out of a meat truck and steal $87,000 in donated cash from the back of an armored car. Two Harlem detectives, Gravedigger Jones and Coffin Ed Johnson, chase the car, and a bale of cotton falls out of the vehicle. Uh, Unremarked at the time, though the authorities approve of O'Malley regarding his Back to Africa movement as a way to solve African racial problems, both Jones and even more so Johnson are hostile towards him, viewing him as a charlatan who is exploiting the impoverished black community in Harlem. Captain Bryce, who has a portrait of Richard Nixon prominently displayed in his office, tells Jones and Johnson not to treat O'Malley as a suspect and orders the duo to ignore him. Jones and Johnson go to the apartment of Iris Brown, O'Malley's mistress, believing he will come see her at some point, but are called away. Iris is able to escape from the policeman sent to guard her. Iris is shocked to discover O'Malley seducing Mabel Hill, the widow of one of his subordinates killed in the robbery, leading to a fight between the two women and Iris being disillusioned with O'Malley. It goes on from there. It's a twisted tale. The the bale of cotton comes into play. They're smuggling things in bales of cotton, and O'Malley is dirty. It was filmed between May and June of 1969. Cotton Comes to Harlem employed many local residents, extra and crew in the Harlem neighborhood where it was filmed. This helped to put a positive spotlight on Harlem, which at the time was ravaged with crime. Again, we talked about this. New York City ran out of money, and they weren't picking up the trash, and buildings were getting condemned and torn down. But seeing that this film would be shot in Harlem and was featuring large crowd scenes such as riots and rallies, John Sabaz, a former bodyguard of Malcolm X and the so-called Black Citizens Patrol, volunteered to control the scenes with their experience in keeping out unwanted spectators and policing traffic. The Black Citizens Patrol's purpose was to protect the Black community from itself, so they made themselves available at all times, even cooperating as an escort service. The film saw the debut of Calvin Lockhart, Judy Pace, and Cleavon Little. Another debut was by Red Fox, already well known as a veteran nightclub comic, leading him to be considered for the TV show Sanford and Son. Cambridge also starred as the white man who turns black in the motion picture comedy Watermelon Man, which opened the same day as Cotton Comes to Harlem. Melba Moore, who sang the film's theme song, Ain't Now, But It's Gonna Be Me, written by Ozzie Davis, was contemporaneously starring in the hit Broadway musical Pearly, which was based on one of Ozzie Davis's play, Pearly Victorious, which also stars Cleavon Little and Moore, both of whom became Tony Award winners for their performance. So as they're making this picture, they're getting Tony Awards for a show in Broadway that they're also doing. I don't think Mabel Moore and Cleavon Little slept
Mm.
in the 4 or 5 weeks they took to film this, because they were also doing a Broadway show, which is so you got a 6 night run, and you've got at least one matinee. So 7 performances a week, possibly 8, and filming this movie in Harlem up from Broadway. So that's amazing. This is one of those ones that not a lot of people have seen recently. It is in our playlist, um, the full film. It is a pretty good uh, copy of it. It's not streaming right now, so it is in our list. If it is not in our list, check it on the streaming services. That generally means they take it off of YouTube when they put it up for streaming. Um, but it is currently there. It is a fairly decent copy. You should sit down and see it. It's a lot of fun. It's really great, and you get a lot of the direction from Ozzie Davis is kind of amazing. I do have an interview after the film with Ozzie Davis from the 1990s where he talks about filming Cotton Comes to Harlem and then its sequel, Come Back Charleston Blue. Um, this is one of those films that not a whole lot of people have seen um, since its 1970 debut. It is fairly popular um, in the circles of fans of blaxploitation films, but it's not one that immediately comes to mind like Shaft. But I would say again, it is there's a comedic turn to it. But Coffin and Gravedigger, the two detectives,
Hmm.
are incredible. These these two dudes are diehard gumshoe, full on New York City detectives, patrolling a neighborhood that's falling apart. Um, I love both of them in this. You see them a lot as um, secondary characters, but they actually starred in this film, and oh my God, they're just incredible. Um, I would recommend this again. The cotton bale falling off the back of the thing, and Coffin's reaction to it. He looks at it while they're driving, chasing these guys, and he looks over at it. He's like, "Son of a bitch." But it's also that's where the title comes from. Cotton comes to harm because it's a bale of fucking cotton.
Right.
But it's oh my God, it's beautiful. It's well shot. You can tell again that they didn't have studio money working on this, but it's oh my God, it's well done. In some cases, some dudes get thrown around, and when I say thrown around, they actually get thrown around. Uh, Gravedigger and Cotton, or Gravedigger and Coffin are almost almost superheroes. It's definitely one you should check out if you're interested in the genre itself. I'm assuming you've never seen this one. I would
Mm-mm.
be surprised if you'd seen this one.
No, I'd never heard of this one.
Um, the next one is The Mac. Um, The Mac is a 1973 American blaxploitation crime drama film written by California native Michael Campos and starring Max Julian and Richard Pryor. This film also stars Oscar-nominated Juanita Moore and Tony-nominated actor Dick Anthony Williams. It was filmed in Oakland. The movie follows the rise and fall of Goldie, who returns from a 5-year prison sentence to find that his brother is involved in black nationalism. Goldie decides to take an alternative path, striving to become the city's biggest pimp. Although reviews were less than favorable when initially released, The Mac is considered by many critics to be the best entry in the genre. This film is often categorized as blaxploitation, but Michael Campos, Max Julian, and others involved in its production have argued that the genre label oversimplifies this film. The film's soundtrack was recorded by Motown artist Willie Hutch, um, which this is his biggest hit. But some of the stuff he did for the Mac was amazing. So, after returning home from a 5-year prison sentence, John Goldie Mickens has a plan to achieve money and power in Oakland, California by becoming a pimp. Goldie's criminal ways contrast with his brother Olinga's black nationalist efforts to save the community from drugs and violence. With Slim as his partner, Slim played by Richard Pryor, and Lulu as his head prostitute, he organizes a team of women and quickly rises to prominence. His success catches the attention of Fat Man, the heroin kingpin that Goldie worked for before heading to prison, and Hank and Jed, two corrupt and racist white detectives. Goldie refuses to work for Fat Man again and dismisses the detective's request to stop his brother from riding the streets of drugs, and as a result, his mother is assaulted, which eventually leads to her death. Although Olinga is disappointed in Goldie because he brought death to their house, he agrees to help him get revenge. They develop a plan with Slim to seek revenge, but their plans fall apart when Hank and Jed kill Slim at their rendezvous point. And then it goes on from there. Production of the film took place from September to late December in 1972, so about 6 weeks. According to the director Michael Campos, the original script for the film was written on prison toilet paper by Bobby Poole, an inmate at San Quentin. While staying in Oakland for 2 months, Campos met Frank Ward, a real pimp and drug dealer from Oakland. Max Julian's character of Goldie is based on Frank Ward. To shoot the movie, Campus needed Ward's permission because many scenes were filmed in his territory. And in exchange for his guidance and protection, Campus put Ward in the film. All of the homeless people, junkies, pimps, and women in the film were supplied by Frank Ward. And although Campus had Ward's protection, the film was also in Black Panther territory. During filming, Black Panther party members would throw bottles and trash cans from the rooftops for filming to run smoothly. An additional deal was made with Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, who were put in charge of providing extras for the film. About halfway through the production of the film, Frank Ward was shot and killed while in his Rolls Royce. There was speculation that the Black Panthers were responsible for Ward's death, but the filmmakers and cast relocated to safer areas for filming. Despite the tensions, the film's opening was shot in Oakland, with all of the proceeds going to the Black Panthers breakfast program. Um, so the Mac. Um, the Mac was really popular in the community. It was written by a man in prison originally, the
Hmm.
original story. Um, it was based on the life of someone in the community um, of Oakland. Most of the cast was from the Oakland community, with the exception of Richard Pryor. Um, it's amazing. It's amazing. It is dark. Um, this is not a film for the faint of heart. I did not get the full Mac on here. I was able to find a streaming copy of the Mac. No, I was able to find a YouTube playthrough of it,
Hmm.
but I didn't put it in the list because the quality is really bad. It will pop up on streaming every once in a while. Um, but again, the Mac is beloved in the Blaxploitation fan community, as well as the Oakland community at large, because it does shine a light on Oakland, which is kind of forgotten um, in a lot of cases. Um, I love it. Richard Pryor is great. It's the first time I ever saw him do dramatic. You don't really see him do true dramatic again until the
JoJo Dancer.
no, I was saying there's one earlier than that where he's like a Vietnam vet who returns from war.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
I can't remember the name of that film. I need to go look it up. But
I got it. I got it. I'll get it.
oh my God, that is so um it it harkens back to that and JoJo Dancer. So if you like JoJo Dancer, his portrayal in that, you're gonna love Slim. Um, because again, and there are no good guys in this movie. Everybody's a bad guy. Everybody does what they have to survive. Um,
What year?
oh, the Richard Pryor,
Some kind of hero.
some kind of hero.
That's
Was
the
that
one
before? That
that's the
was
one he
before
turned
JoJo
down.
Dancer, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Some kind of hero was 82. JoJo was 86.
Yeah, some kind of hero. It was like that. And he has done some other. He did some other. He was kind of a serious role in Bingo Long too.
And which one?
Bingo
Oh,
Long.
the Bingo Long.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, the this one it's hard to find. Um, because again, there's no heroic characters in this. Everybody's doing what they can to survive. Um, well, I guess the brother, um, Olinga, he changed his name to Olinga. Goldie calls him something else. um, but yeah, Olinga is basically it. But I mean, Olinga gets down and helps try to kill the people that killed his mama too. So I mean, it's dark. It's it's a guy that just got out of prison who's trying to right some wrongs, but also much like Black Caesar, he becomes a dark character the more power he gets. But I would recommend this one to anybody who's interested in this film genre because if you can find a good copy, and again, there is a YouTube uh, film, it's almost unwatchable. It's that bad. Um, which is weird because our Cotton Comes to Harlem is beautiful. It's it's in those beautiful 70s colors that they used in film, not quite Technicolor, but that like vibrant reds and stuff like that. Bright light, just amazing. But that version of the Mac was not good. That's why I didn't include it. Um, but every once in a while it pops up. You definitely want to check that one out. If nothing else, to see Richard Pryor just fucking shine. Oh, Wild in the Streets. He was a serious character in Wild in the Streets too.
Mm.
That was like 68, 69. But yeah, oh, oof, I love the Mac. Um, and again, I assume you have never seen the Mac.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Nope.
The next film is The Black Six. It is a 1974 American blaxploitation and outlaw biker film written by George Thekos and directed by Matt Simber. It starred several National Football League stars in the title roles. It was one of the first all-black biker films. Um, the plot involves an African American veteran of the Vietnam War, played by Gene Washington, who returns home to find that his brother, played by Robert Howard, has been killed. The killing was done by a white supremacist motorcycle gang led by Ben Thor Davidson, who objects to the fact that Howard had been dating Thor's sister. Washington and his motorcycle gang, known as the Black Six, vow to avenge his brother's death. The Six encounter a number of obstacles, including hostile motorcycle gangs, particularly Thor's, and racist policemen. The movie climaxes with an inconclusive battle royale between the Sixes and Thor's Caucasian supremacist biker gang, in which Thor apparently blows them and himself up by igniting the gas tank of his own motorcycle. The film concludes with the caption, "Honky, look out. Hassle a brother and the Black Six will return." The cast of the Black Six were Gene Washington, who was a wide receiver for the 49ers, Mean Joe Green, a defensive tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Eugene Mercury Morris, a running back for the Miami Dolphins, Lim Barney, a cornerback with the Detroit Lions, Lanier, a linebacker with the Kansas City Chiefs, and Carl Eller, a defensive end with the Minnesota Vikings. So these guys were all at the top of their game in 1974. Mean Joe Green's pretty. Gene Washington and Mean Joe Green got into the zeitgeist, but a lot of these other guys, unless you're from that city, you probably don't know them. The players' teams appeared with the actors' names in the film credits. In addition, the cast included Ben Davidson, who recently retired from football as a member of a motorcycle gang opposing the Black Six. Murray Willis, a recently retired Major League Baseball star, also starred in the role. Washington was given the lead role due to him having previous acting experience. He and several other cast members, many of whom did more acting afterwards, later criticized how poorly the script had been written. All six protagonists and Davidson were all pro, while Green, Barney, Lanier, and Eller have since been inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It was filmed on location in Franzier Park, California. Several of the football players were disappointed with elements of the original script, especially that the black motorcycles would be killed in the end, despite the fact that they stood for truth, justice, and the American way. As a result of their protest, an inconclusive ending was shot. Now, I have included a full copy of the Black Six. Um, it is better than that copy of the Mac. That's why I included it. We do get a lot of scenes from the Mac.
Go ahead and put the Mac out there, even if it's a bad copy, if it's
Okay.
grainy or something. I why not?
Okay.
It's
I'll
all
go
you
out
can
and
get.
find
It's
it.
all you can get.
Yeah. I'll go out and see if I can't find it. I did look for it for streaming like last night to see if it had popped up because we turned the month over.
Hmm.
I did not find it, but I may try it again. Again, it's one of those things. If you the Max, one of those. If you could find it, it's beautiful. The Black Six. The Black Six is an exploitation film, pure and simple. Um, but it is kind of. It's basically the only one of its nature. The Black Motorcycle Gang, Black exploitation film. They really didn't do a whole lot. They never made a sequel. But yeah, the Black Six is it's pretty cool. Um, just you see these guys, and I didn't realize it. Mean Joe Green and Washington they weren't bad actors, man. The rest of those guys, they didn't give them a lot of lines. Mean Joe Green wasn't bad. I believe Mean Joe Green. When
he's
he's
pretty
whooping
he's pretty
somebody's ass, he looks like he's whooping somebody's
but
ass.
he is pretty bad as an actor. I mean, honestly, go back to the Coke commercial that he had, you
Here you
know.
go, kid. No, he's
Yeah,
better than that. You need to
it's
see, check out the Black Six. He's great in the Black
it's
Six.
terrible in that he was not a great actor at all. I mean,
He,
he did what he was good at, which was play football.
he is good in the Black Six. Check him out. Check him out. Yeah, he got better. It was
Matter of
way
fact,
better than the Coke commercial.
if I recall correctly, didn't he become head coach of UNT?
No,
I'm looking.
I don't know. It's
I'm
footballs.
looking.
I remember Mean Joe Green because he was in a commercial, and Gene Washington was in some other stuff.
Let's see. 2008. He was coach. He was assistant coach of the field. Continue on. I'm reading.
Oh, okay. With the Black Six is they're all ex-Vietnam vets who were a biker gang for truth, justice, and the American way. They're a superhero band that ride motorcycles, and it's awesome. Um, I love this one. This is a popcorn movie. This is not like the Mac or Black Caesar or this is like the Rudy Ray Moore movie.
I'm so sorry.
This
He did not coach at UNT. He played for UNT.
he played for
I
UNT.
knew there was a tie in there. Anyway,
But
bygones
yeah,
continue.
but yeah, that's the Black Sixes. That's one of those ones. It's just fun. And I will see if I can't find that Mac one again and see if I may see if I can't find a cleaner copy as well. Because you need to see the Mac. The Mac is outstanding. But again, it's dark, it's gritty. It's not something it's not something you want to eat popcorn and watch at night like the Black Six or Petey Wheatstraw, son-in-law of the devil. But yeah, I tried to find some stuff that kind of span the genre and speaks to the genre. I may do another one of these later on. But I gotta sit down and watch a bunch of them. These are the ones that I have seen recently. Um, More recently when I was writing these notes up. And again, kids, I write these notes up sometimes months in advance of recording. And, we're 10 weeks ahead in recording. So when I wrote this up, I was watching all of these movies or had seen them recently. But except for the first episode, Across 110th Street, I watched it twice because it's that good of a movie.
Mm.
But yeah, these are fun, interesting, and they kind of give a window into America because once we stopped doing these. They did a couple of parodies in the 80s and the 90s, like I'm Gonna Get You Sucker and Hollywood Shuffle, and but yeah, they by 1980 these things were done. Um, you don't really get them back. Well, Action Jackson maybe, but that wasn't really a blaxploitation film. He was just a hero. Um, so yeah, it's definitely a piece of film history. Jackie Brown was an homage to blaxploitation cinema.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, they basically started doing these like 1969, 1970, and did them till about 77, 78, maybe as late as 1980, and then they were done. So this is just like a 10-year period of history. And they made a lot of them in that period. But with the changing of they stopped using the old Hays Code, so exploitation cinema kind of went away. Again, most of the grindhouses converted to porn theaters, and the drive-ins would show more kid-friendly fare to get families in. Um, but occasionally the drive-ins would do like we're gonna show a couple of good action films on this one screen while all the kids' movies are over on the other, especially they had more than one screen. So yeah, that's about it for blaxploitation films for now. Our next episode we're going to talk about music because I thought I can't really talk about the movies without talking about the music. So
Awesome. All right. With that, we will step over to the murder side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off BBC News, CBS News, Medium, the Los Angeles Times, ABC 7 News, and the Hollywood Reporter. And there's going to be some names in here I'm not going to be able to get, but this is the murder of Iana
Kazan?
Kasian,
Kasian.
maybe. Do you know this one?
No, I
Okay,
know the name Kazan.
Kasian.
No,
Kazan?
that's not the Kazan I'm thinking of.
No, Kasian. Kasian?
Yeah, Kazian.
Kasian, maybe,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Iana. So she was a Ukrainian native. Iana had it all. She had brains, striking good looks, and a personality that was said to light up a room. She immigrated to Los Angeles in 2014, and at the time, she had been a former law student. She had her sights set on a career in modeling. Um, Within a few months of arriving in the States, at 28 years old, she was already booking modeling gigs. As a means of getting her foot in the door, she began attending industry functions in the hopes of grabbing the attention of Hollywood power players. At
Hmm.
one such soiree in 2015, she met an up-and-coming writer, director, and film producer named Blake Leibel. They had a whirlwind courtship, and they were quickly engaged. And while Iana was a outgoing beauty who turned heads everywhere she went, her new man was socially awkward, who seemed a bit out of place in his surroundings. But fortunately for him, what he lacked in charm, he more than made up for in wealth. Unlike Iana, who came from a humble background, Leibel was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. His father, Lorne, made a fortune as a real estate tycoon in Canada, while his mother's affluence came from old money. Having been born to a pair of multimillionaires, Blake Leibel and his younger brother Cody never wanted for anything. When the boys were just reaching adulthood, their parents decided to end their marriage. And when the time came for them to move into houses, Cody had chosen to live with their father, while Blake took up residence with their mother. She gave him free reign to do as he pleased, and he began spending time in New York City's eclectic artist community. He had an $18,000 a month stipend at his disposal, courtesy of his father.
Whoa. What year was this?
This was in 2000. Well, so she met him in 2015, so somewhere
Well,
before 2015.
okay, so he's $18,000 a month and he's not paying for his housing.
Right.
Good God.
Yeah. Yeah. He was very generous with his money, and he was welcomed in the artist community with open arms, of course, because he was probably throwing around money.
Hmm.
Um, in 2009, he had written, directed, and produced a raunchy straight-to-video comedy called Bald. The
Called
film was
what?
Bald, B-A-U, Bald,
Oh, bald. Okay.
Bald. Uh, the film was panned by critics and audiences alike, but he remained determined to make a name for himself in the world of cinema. Um, he didn't really matter if he was going to be the next Steven Spielberg, or Ed Wood. Um, but he didn't care. His pockets were deep enough to fund any project he wanted to do. A year later, he was instrumental in the creation of a graphic novel titled Syndrome, which told the story of a psychologist trying to find a cure for murder. There were macabre illustrations that included depictions of victims being hung upside down and bled dry. The cover featured a baby doll with its scalp removed, exposing the brain. And these over the top images, along with the ominous line of dialogue, quote, "We all become monsters in the end," would figure heavily in events that would come. In 2011, his mother passed away, leaving him richer than he ever imagined. He inherited 5.5 million from her estate, and he permanently settled in Hollywood. Later that year, he married his longtime girlfriend, model Amanda Braun. Not long after they were married, they welcomed their first child. Leibel had assumed the role of a family man, but it wasn't a part he could play convincingly for long. He had a roving eye, millions of dollars to throw around as he saw fit, and by 2015, he was back on the dating scene. The fact that he had a wife and son at home hadn't seemed to bother him in the least little bit. So when Iana was introduced to Libel, she had been instantly smitten with him. He threw around money like it grew on trees, and the feelings between them were mutual. The only obstacle standing in the way, of course, was Amanda, who was a month away from delivering their second child. Um, but believing that the heart wants what it wants, he packed his things and left his family to be with the new woman in his life. So Iana was a traditional girl at heart. She made it clear from the beginning that she wasn't interested in getting involved with a married man. Iana wanted to make sure that any loose ends were tied up before moving forward. For his part, Leibel had assured her that the marriage was long over before she knew the picture. And the way he told it, he and Amanda had been separated for quite some time, were heading for divorce one way or another. So Iana was satisfied she wasn't a home wrecker, so she focused all of her attention on building a life with Leibel in the West Hollywood condo they called home. And before long, she announced that she too was expecting. Although her already married lover wanted to be the center of her universe, he took the news better than she had expected. She hadn't realized at the time that he was a much better actor than he was a filmmaker, though. When Iana would inquire about the status of the divorce, Libel's stock answer was that the papers were in the process of being finalized. As the weeks stretched into months, she waited patiently for the day that they would walk down the aisle, which she hoped would come before the baby was born. And then cracks began to appear in their facade that they had created. Some of the trouble stemmed from Libel's irrational fear that his brother Cody, who was an amateur player on the poker circuit, owed millions of dollars to the Russian mafia. There's no evidence that this was indeed true, but he had become convinced that he and his family were being targeted by the mob. Um, if his paranoid delusions weren't enough, Leibel was also juggling three romantic entanglements at once, besides Amanda, who was caring for a toddler and newborn with little help from him. His pregnant girlfriend, Iana. He was also seeing Constance Bucafuri, who was another attractive young woman who had fallen under his spell. And he was so taken with her, in fact, that he was putting her up in one of the many homes that he owned, unbeknownst to his fiance. So, wife, fiance, girlfriend.
Wow.
In
Wow.
yeah, in and two of them had children, or
Hmm.
well, one was about to have a child, and one had two. I mean,
Yeah. Good God.
Um, in March of 2016, the Iana and Leibel's daughter Diana was delivered under cesarean section. Iana's mother Olga had flown in from Ukraine to be by her daughter's side and help take care of the baby during
Okay.
her recovery period. Less than a month later, Constance had Leibel arrested on charges of sexual assault. And though this meant revealing the affair he had been trying to hide, he called Iana and asked her to post bail, which she did.
Ugh.
Um, Iana now had the blinders off. She realized that Leibel was a habitual cheater and had been all along. She didn't want to be a pawn in his game of lies and broken promises, so she packed up Diana, who was only a few days old, and moved in with her mother. During the one of the many heart to heart they would have in the next coming days, Iana had confided to Olga that Leibel had demanded sex from her multiple times a day, even though she had only been recently released from the hospital. On occasions when she couldn't or wouldn't oblige, he warned her if she didn't give him what he wanted, he would get it elsewhere. Iana also lamented the fact that Leibel seemed to have no interest in Diana. Rather than being a doting father, he was jealous of the baby for hogging all the attention. And as this resentment grew, he constantly berated Iana for focusing on the newborn while his needs weren't being met. This guy is a real piece of shit.
Piece of shit.
On Tuesday, May 23rd, 2016, Olga and Iana went shopping for a stroller for Diana. And at some point that afternoon, Iana received a text from Leibel. Olga didn't know the contents of the message, but she could tell by the worried expression on Iana's face that it wasn't good. And before she could get any information, Iana had rushed off, saying she needed to go to the condo in West Hollywood. So their day had been cut short. Olga had taken Diana home and waited to hear from Iana. But the hours ticked by without any word, and she grew increasingly concerned that something was wrong. She called Iana's cell phone numerous times, but it was going straight to voicemail. She was worried something terrible had happened, so she contacted the police. You guessed it, who informed her she could that they would check into it and get back to her later.
Yeah.
Once again, we have a person who's potentially in trouble. Oh,
Yeah.
we'll look into it later.
Yeah. We'll look into it.
There's LA for you. Um, Olga still hadn't heard anything by the next morning,
They
so
got to
she
be
had
missing 48 hours. No, they don't.
no, they don't.
No, they
A
don't.
complete lie.
No, they do not.
Olga still hadn't heard anything by the next morning. She asked a friend to stay with Diana while she went to the condo. She found the gate locked and she stood in front of the building trying to figure out a way in. As she looked around for a way to get in, she saw Lybel staring at her from a third floor window. Their eyes met together and she called his name and asked to be let in, but he pretended not to hear. Um, Seeing that Olga was desperate to get in, another resident of the complex unlocked the gate and let her inside.
Because he probably
She,
knew who she was.
potentially,
Yeah.
potentially. She reached the condo and was certain that Iana was being held against her will, so she started banging on the door and ringing the bell. No one answered, so she called the police again, who agreed to meet her at the building. The responding officers pounded on the door a few times before giving up. And since they said that there was no reason to believe a crime had taken place, they explained there was nothing else they could do. I can't disagree with them. They don't know that something bad has happened.
That's
This is
right.
just a mother saying that. And so I police can go do a welfare check,
Hmm.
even if you suggest something. I've done this in the past for an employee that worked for
Hmm.
me that we
Yeah.
just didn't hear from them.
Yeah.
And I had police do a welfare check, and they did it fairly quickly, so they
Yep.
can absolutely do it. Anyway, so the police got back in their car and drove away, which left Olga there alone. She didn't have anything more she could do, so she went home and hoped that Iana was safe. Thursday morning, Olga placed her third call to police, and she explained to them with the help of an interpreter that her daughter was recovering from surgery and she might be suffering from complications. So she made arrangements to meet the police at the condo. They again knocked on the door, received no answer. The officers called out loud and clear they were from the sheriff's department. That didn't get any results. So they contacted the property manager, who used a pass key to unlock the door. When they tried to get in, they found that the interior latches were locked. So now they knew someone was deliberately trying to keep them out. So they decided to down the back door using a break down the door using a battering ram.
Hmm.
They made their way through the living room, but saw no signs of anyone there. They came to the first bedroom and discovered that the door was locked. Um, and instead of busting through, instead they just took off the hinges on this one.
Yeah.
Um, there
Oh, we
wasn't
gotta break
any,
down the door. No, you don't. Look, just click, click,
just
click,
pop
click,
these
click,
off.
click, click.
There wasn't anybody inside, but the space was in disarray and bloodstains were present on the bedding.
Oh.
They moved on to the next room, and their progress was again impeded by a locked door. They tried to force their way in, and then they heard a male voice informing them that he wasn't coming out. The officers told him they needed Iana, and he claimed that she wasn't home. The police were sure at this point that that was Lybel and tried to convince him to show himself. He then phoned a friend and asked him to come over, who arrived at the scene. And the friend managed to persuade Lybel to open the door. There was a mattress that he had used to barricade the door, and he emerged only wearing boxer shorts. Homicide detectives were on hand at this point in anticipation of what was hiding in the bedroom. Investigators immediately noticed smears of blood that looked as if someone had been working hard to clean up evidence of crime. They scanned the room and they saw a woman lying on the bed under a blanket that sported a cartoon character. They assumed this was to be Iana, and it was apparent that she had suffered horrific injuries that proved fatal. Among other things, the top of her head had been removed, and the right side of her face and right ear were missing. Officers pulled back the covers. They saw that Iana was nude and was white as the hotel bed sheet. They would later learn that this lack of pigmentation was due to the fact that their body had been almost completely drained of blood. Lybel was arrested on the spot, led away in handcuffs. He passed by Olga as he was passed by Olga, who hadn't been allowed to enter. She knew the horrific truth that she was never going to see her daughter again at that point. Um, as he was being booked into custody, it was noted that Lybel's face was scratched and bruised. He had at least one bite mark on his arm, indicating to
She fought back.
observers, yep, that she had fought like an animal for her life. Under intense questioning, Leibel
Slava
denied.
Ukraini. Those people don't go down without a fight.
No, he denied having anything to do with Iana's death. Rather than owning up to his wrongdoings, he told interviewers that science would exonerate him. You go figure on this one. This one, there's nothing that part
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. But anyway, um, ultimately, science would do the opposite of what he's saying.
Yes,
um,
science would find the truth.
yeah. Investigators were puzzled by the lack of blood at the scene, given the coroner's finding that Iana had died from a combination of blunt force trauma to the head and exsanguination, which means literally she bled to death. The average human body holds over a gallon of blood.
Yeah.
So they needed to find out where all that had gone. So they brought some luminol that's known as Blue Star Magnum. This is a chemical that can use to detect blood that's no longer visible to the naked eye. They sprayed the Blue Star throughout the condo. The guest bedroom and adjoining baths showed both glowed an eerily purplish blue, indicating that there was copious amount of blood that had been spilled in those areas. Someone had gone to great lengths to clean the rooms from top to bottom, but science had foiled their attempts to wash away the evidence. The medical examiner estimated that Iana's excruciating ordeal had lasted anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. This is rough. Her death had been so drawn out that security cameras captured at least two instances where Leibel had food delivered to the residents.
Okay. Wait a minute. So the first time the mom called the police, could they have saved her?
Potentially.
Son of a bitch.
Potentially.
Fucking LAPD.
I mean, he was torturing her, and basically, this
Yeah,
woman he supposedly loved, he stopped torturing her at least twice to grab a
to
bite
get
to eat.
to get something to eat
Yeah.
because he's hungry.
During the investigation, detectives uncovered trash bags containing bloody clothing, sheets, and blankets in the building's dumpster. There was a bloody handprint found on the lid of the dumpster that matched that of Blake Leibel. While all signs pointed to Leibel as the perpetrator, his motives were a mystery. He refused to take any blame in Iana's murder, so investigators had to piece together a likely scenario.
Yeah, he's a rich kid who's never had to do anything. He doesn't believe he can do.
Well,
He doesn't believe he can.
he's a rich kid who's never had to own up for his own actions.
Exactly. He doesn't believe that he is responsible for anything.
No, no. They did try to get a picture of Lyle by contacting his family and friends, but not one of them was willing to talk about him on the record. No one in his circle would speak either for or against him, so detectives went to Olga for answers. After learning that Leibel had grown distant once the baby had entered the picture, they surmised that his resentment toward Diana for choosing Diana over him had driven him to unleash his hostilities on her. It was evident to everyone who viewed Diana's remains that his goal had been to make sure she suffered, and suffer she did. Um, to him, her death, although inevitable, was inconsequential.
Hmm.
Um, it wasn't lost on crime scene investigators that rather than covering her decimated body with a blanket from the bed they once shared, he chose to use a blanket from his own daughter's nursery. Again, the cartoon character blanket. Yeah. His trial for murder finally got underway in June of 2018. He was bending over backwards to appear incompetent, but a court-appointed psychiatrist who examined him prior to proceedings concluded he was fully capable of understanding right from wrong. They pointed to the fact he had taken great pains to clean up the mess in the aftermath of the killing as proof that he knew exactly what he had done and didn't want to get caught. The lies he told police, including his claims that Iana wasn't in the residence, also pointed to his brazen attempts to cover his tracks.
Her
Prosecutors
blood
were
was everywhere and her body was there. She
right,
wasn't in the residence.
right. Prosecutors were quick to enter a copy of Syndrome into evidence. Although Blake Leibel hadn't actually written the content, he had signed off on it and been instrumental in getting it published. The grisly similarities between the slayings depicted in the graphic novel and the fate that had befallen Iana were difficult to ignore. Upon viewing the pictures of the injuries that had been inflicted upon Iana and learning that she had been scalped from the back of her head to the front, several jurors had just shaken their head in disbelief. And to make a horrifying scenario even worse, they heard testimony that she was alive when the top of her head was removed and probably survived for some time after the fact. Um, Most of the jury were unable to conceal their emotions when they were given evidence of what Iana had been forced to endure for hours on end.
That
Uh,
doesn't bode well for the defense.
no, at
When the
one
jury
point,
starts crying when evidence is released, oh no.
yeah, at one point, Olga had taken to the stand to share her insights with the relationship between Libel and Iana. She freely admitted she had seemed head over heels in love with that he had seemed head over heels in love with her daughter, but she was quick to add that his affections had shifted after Diana was born. It was apparent at that time that the man who had gotten everything he wanted his entire life was not about to play second fiddle to anyone, even his own baby. Throughout the proceedings, which lasted 6 days, Blake Libel was portrayed as a spoiled rich kid who had never grown up. We talked about that. Although it wasn't brought out at trial, it was alleged that the defendant himself had openly acknowledged that he knew women were only attracted to his money. He was keenly aware of the power that the dollar wields, and he had used his wealth to control the parade of models who drifted in and out of his life. When he was finished with one, there was always one waiting to take her place. And when the relationship ended, it was he who hammered the final nail, never the woman, that is, until Iana came along. The defense called no witnesses, and Blake Libel wasn't called to stand to tell his own story.
Fuck. Yeah, I'll bet not.
The
I want
jury,
to go speak in my own defense. No, the fuck you don't.
yeah. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Blake Libel guilty of murder and torture in the death of Iana. On June 26, 2018, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There was an appeal that was launched soon after, which was denied in April of 2020. When his guilt was solidified, Olga sued Blake Libel in civil court on both her and her granddaughter's behalf for Iana's wrongful death. And on February 15th, 2019, she was awarded 41.6 million. Way to
Boom.
go.
And she could take care of that kid.
Well, so Olga left at that point. She took Diana and they went back to Ukraine. Um,
Oh no.
yeah, that's where they are. Yeah, unfortunately, that's where they are now. Um, as of the time of this story, no one on her father's side of the family has ever shown any interest in getting to know the little girl that Blake helped bring into the world. As far as anyone knows, they've never met her, nor have they acknowledged her existence. Um, Iana had the quest for living the American dream, and it turned into a nightmare.
Mhm.
But she was laid to rest in her hometown, Kiev, Kyiv, Kiev. I don't know.
What? It's
K
Kiev. Well,
Kiev.
okay. It's Kiev in Russian. It's Kiev in Ukrainian.
Okay, Kiev, Kyiv. Um, and unfortunately, the result of Blake's actions, Diana, Diana was only 2 months old when her mother died. She's only going to know her from pictures and news stories documenting her murder at the hands of the man she once loved, her own father, and that is
Oh
just
my
a
God.
sad, tragic thing. And
Oh damn. And now she's living through a
war,
war.
a war, yeah,
Poor
that's
fucking kid.
that's terrible. It's
I hope they
terrible.
got to Poland.
Yeah, who knows? I've seen nothing past that about them moving back and laying Iana to rest. So that's as far as I got with the story. So, but that's the story of the murder of Iana Kasian.
Well, thank you for that, sir.
Yeah, that will be the end of my side of the show for the day. That will also end our show for the week. As always, you can find more about us on nerderymurdery.com. That's our hub of everything that we talk about here. You'll find links to the topics we talked about this in this episode, plus pictures, and you'll also find the link to our YouTube page, which Zig so often updates.
Yeah, get out there and check that YouTube page out. There are a couple of movies in there. And if I can find a copy of the Mac all the way through, I'll add that too.
Outstanding. Appreciate your work on that.
Sure.
You'll also find the link to our merchandise page, which if you wish to show off your nerdery murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing something from there. You'll also find the link to our Patreon with our merchandise and our patrons. That does go to the costs that are associated with keeping the show on the air. It costs for our website and our uploads and everything that's associated with keeping this show going and bringing the information that you hear week in and week out. But we do appreciate each and every one of you.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. Last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It is free, only takes a minute or two, and really helps others find our topics that may be looking for the information we discuss. So, with that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
and I'm Jeffrey with your murdering.
Cue the music.